Hey guys, welcome back to Chronic Pillness. This is a fairly new podcast. We're getting to the true cause of disease, and by disease, I am referring to acute illness, chronic illness, what we deem as mental illness, addiction as well, and also providing a platform for those who are survivors of medical abuse and iatrogenic harm. Today, I'm really honored to bring on a special guest, Jerry Marzinsky. I was directed to Jerry's work a couple of years ago by other people as well who have been unfairly framed as psychotic. Anyways, I will spare you that, but I wanted to Jerry's a true beacon of light who's been looking at mental health from an out of the box perspective that the DSM and the system confines us in. Here's a brief background on Jerry. Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience working with and studying with the processes, and the voices heard by psychotic and criminally insane patients and some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. He is awarded the state of Arizona's uh, Meritorious Service Award while working in the psychology department of a large state prison. He was also awarded the Pima College's Apple Award for the teaching of abnormal psychology. Jerry has held the position of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Force Air Patrol and is a licensed commercial pilot and a certified scuba instructor and a long distance motorcycle rider. He also served as an assistant scoutmaster. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He is co-author of an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, breaking the spell of the ivory tower. I will conclude Jerry's bio here and links to his website where you can find his book and everything, and his Amazon link in the description of this video. And I'm just really honored just reading Jerry's bio here and talking to him. We have a lot of parallels. I was also a PhD student in clinical psychology before the system came and took me out because anybody who's a danger to the system basically gets taken out. Anyways, it's really great to have you here, Jerry. Maybe you can tell us, how long, like, you have 35 years of experience in as a counselor in a mental health field. When did you start
More than that.
knowing more than that? When did you start knowing, like, with your soul that our mental health system is broken and that the way we were perceiving psychosis and schizophrenia was wrong?
I think it was right after I got hired at Central State Hospital after graduate school. So it's my first job after graduate school.
Uh-huh.
And Central State was most likely the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet at the time. They had 10,000 patients when I got there in the early 70s. And that was down from like 23,000.
And this was in Georgia,
This was in
or
central Georgia.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
Milledgeville, Georgia.
right,
And, I got out of graduate school and, completed 4 years of psychology and then, 2 years of counseling and read a whole bunch of stuff that they kind of force down your throat. And, was going out and I'm going, okay, yeah, I'm going to change things.
mhm,
And got into that state hospital and found that virtually nothing they taught me clinically worked.
right, right.
It was like, and especially with schizophrenics, it's like trying to drive a rhino off the highway with a BB rifle. You,
Yeah,
you may as
yeah,
well be talking to rocks,
right, right, right.
and it didn't work well with, it worked some with some patients, but it didn't work well.
No,
You
very,
know,
very terrible treatment outcomes, either through psychotherapy or medication. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I saw that too. It, I remember well, when I first got the inkling that something was wrong is I was working on a big psychiatric unit at that hospital, and you know, fresh out of graduate school, and I was doing my rounds on the first floor. There was a maintenance man cutting the metal cap off of the hollow stairwell that went up to the second floor of this psychiatric unit. So I'd already noticed that there was no cap on the top of that banister on the second floor.
Hmm.
I didn't make anything of it, but I noticed there wasn't a cap there. Okay. So here's the maintenance man with a grinder cutting that cap off of the bottom of the banister. And I'm like, I wonder why he's doing that, you know? And there were sparks flying all over the place and there was smoke. It was like a little mini 4th of July, and all the psychiatric patients were standing around watching the sparks fly. So I just joined in with them and, watching the show.
Right.
And then soon as he cut through that pipe, what it was an actual hollow pipe that just went up 2 flight of stairs. When that cap fell to the floor, it was followed by a avalanche of multicolored pills, and they just kept pouring out of that banister and pouring out of that banister. It was like a waterfall of psychiatric pills just spreading out all over the floor.
Wow.
And I'm standing there with my jaw wide, dropped, like looking at this and thinking every single one of those pills is a vote by a psychiatric patient to not get better.
They're not. Yeah.
And that's what I was brainwashed
That's
to
what
think
you were
at the
thinking.
time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would they do that?
Yeah.
And this was probably decades of pills that they'd been dumping down that banister.
Yeah.
Now if they got caught throwing away their pills, they'd be in trouble, but it's easy enough to, throw them down that banister without, anybody knowing.
Yeah.
But if you spit them out or put them under your tongue, and then you had to find somewhere to spit them out where they wouldn't notice it.
Right.
But, that was like a wake-up call. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Because I'd been brainwashed to think that the only treatment for mental illness were pills.
Right. Exactly. We've all been brainwashed to believe that.
So, there was the counseling thing that was supposed to help. But, when you sat down with some people that were, more than usually disturbed, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I realized that something was off. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd also been brainwashed to believe that the only treatment for schizophrenia were pills. Okay. Now this goes back well before my time. It goes back to 1910. In 1910, the Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefeller Group sponsored the infamous Flexner Report, which they paid Congress to push through, that shut down any medical school teaching subjects outside of mainstream pharmacology. So here it is. You can't teach anything except if it involves pills.
That the allopathic model using petroleum-based pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So,
right.
Obviously, clear conflict of interest with Rockefeller controlling oil and gas. And,
So they paid off Congress to push this thing through. Mm-hmm. And it was so powerful that only a few medical schools, such as Johns Hopkins and McGill, survived, and maybe a handful of others. They were the only ones who were able to legally license doctors. So they shut down all these other medical schools unless they taught pharmacological-based medicine, and they made it the law to line their own pockets. Doctors who did anything other than that they took their license. So acupuncture, naturopathy, Tesla's violet rays, any electrical treatment, any of these other kinds of treatments that were just budding and just coming out, they were shot down. Insurance companies wouldn't pay for them. They were called, quacks?
Yeah, woo-woo, quacky stuff.
Woo-woo, quacks.
It just made taboo supplements and sunlight and exercise.
Right. And any of these doctors who went against that, they faced having their license removed.
Right.
Right. So that's where this mess started with Rockefeller and this bunch of money hungry,
Psychopaths.
psychopaths. yeah. Good, good
In,
word.
in my opinion, John D. Rockefeller is the biggest villain in all of American history. Truly, what he did to mental health in the medical field, and obviously its monopolization of energy, and it's really, he's a psychopath. He just insatiable need for greed and control, and it's ruthless is what he was.
Yeah. So at Central State, there was no lack of schizophrenics. I mean, there was unlimited supply.
Yeah, that's unfortunately true of prison populations all across the country.
Yes,
This is where we've placed so many people with so-called mental illness throughout the world, that we've incarcerated them.
right. What they did was back in the 70s, I think it was the late 70s, they came up with this Proposition 13 in California, which was actually a tax rebellion. People were they were just being choked by the income and the land taxes, property taxes, that they just rebelled. So California went, well, something's got to go, and what are we going to get rid of? And that was part of it. They go, well, let's just get rid of the psychiatric hospitals. We'll put these people in. And I was in Georgia at the time, and I watched this come through, and here's the psychologist saying, "Oh, this is a wonderful thing. These people are going to be put out into the population, in a more normal population. We're going to increase the number of mental health centers, the number of mental health staff, and they will go there." And right. Even at that time, I'm going, they won't even take their medicines while they're here being handed to them.
Right.
What in the devil makes you think they're going to go out of their way to find a ride to a mental health center that's overcrowded and gives them a bunch of crap to get these toxic drugs that they've been dumping down the banister for the last, 50 years? What makes them think they're going to volunteer? They don't take them when they're handed to them.
Well, I imagine they would take them if they were effective and didn't come with catastrophic side effects, but they're poison.
They're toxic. They're very toxic. They call them side effects, but what they are is those are toxic effects.
I call them consequences. They're lifelong consequences.
Well, with long enough use, they sure are. And it calls that akinesia. It's permanent. If it goes on, it's permanent neurological damage.
Yeah.
Damages, and I found this out later, was that some researchers who were doing research on a population like the one I was working with, chronic schizophrenics, they found when they did the autopsies, their brains were shrunk like walnuts.
Yeah, okay? Yeah. There's so much gray matter damage done.
Yeah, and they're going, well, they're in with the same population. The only difference is that they have been taking these antipsychotic drugs for years, right? Yeah, exactly. So they came to the conclusion that these drugs are causing neurological damage, and they somehow evaded the screening for journals and that kind of stuff. I mean, if you publish anything against psychiatry or big pharma in the journals, they lose their funding. Yeah, that's cut off. They're done. They're cut off. Yeah. So these guys somehow got through that, and of course the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia started squealing like stuck pigs. Like it's not our drugs. It's the schizophrenia doing this. Right. So those researchers, they didn't buy that. So they started feeding these drugs to rats and mice and monkeys, and found that their brains were shrinking also
from the drugs.
The drugs. Yeah. Now they don't put that in any of the side effects. It's not there. They don't tell these patients that. They don't tell the public that.
Of course not.
And they're making $11 billion, not million, $billion a year selling these antipsychotic drugs to whoever they can convince to take them.
Yeah, that
Uh,
make you sensory numb, they make you spiritually numb, they make you
Right.
overweight, they give you metabolic problems, cholesterol problems, weight problems. It's just they're a nightmare. With some even young boys lactate from these drugs. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
it's frightening drugs. Yeah,
Yeah. And they're giving them to lots of children right now.
yeah, that's really
You
concerning,
know,
highly alarming.
it is. It is very alarming. I have those. I mean, here's some of the side effects. I have the actual statistics somewhere. I'll keep looking for them.
Yeah, from
You
these
know,
drugs, I developed metabolic syndrome, terrible cholesterol, and tardive dyskinesia, and they're long-term consequences.
yeah.
They're
And
they're
here's
and I was just a zombie on these things, and they never
yeah,
helped my mood. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. They just turn you into a zombie. You know,
Yeah.
here's some of the side effects, and this was Thorazine. Now they were using Thorazine big time when I was
Hmm.
back in that
Before the
state
atypicals
hospital.
came out. Yeah.
Right. The
Yeah.
atypicals were just coming out while I was there. So
Mhm.
here's just some of the side effects: uh, dizziness, drowsiness, anxiety, sleep problems, insomnia, breast swelling or discharge, changes in menstrual period, weight gain, swelling in the hands and feet, dry mouth, stuffy nose, blurred vision, constipation. You know, and there's side effects for newborns. Let me see what else we got here. Uncontrolled muscle movements. That's the akinesia.
Right.
The chewing, the tongue darting,
Yeah, that's what I
that kind
got.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Smacking of the lips,
Hmm.
frowning, tongue,
Hmm.
blinking eyes, stiffness in the neck, tightness in your throat, trouble breathing, swallowing, lightheaded feeling like you might pass out, confusion, agitation, feeling jittery. And you wonder why these people don't want to take these drugs. Trouble
Right.
sleeping, weakness. Now you think it's a major tranquilizer, it should knock them out. No, they're having
Yeah.
trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Seizures, jaundice, low white blood cell counts, dry mouth, drowsiness, blurred vision, constipation, impotence, trouble having organism, white blood cell counts way down.
Hmm.
Um,
And it's not a whole lot better with the atypicals with the newer
no,
medications
no,
either.
it's not.
And the newer medications still aren't curing any of the mental illness.
No, none of their drugs cure anything.
I know, I
Nothing.
know.
You ask a
Yeah,
psychiatrist how many people has he cured, and if he's
sure.
telling you the truth, he'll say zero.
Zero.
All they do is
Exactly.
treat symptoms. Now
Exactly.
here's geodone, which I believe is an atypical
Yeah,
antipsychotic.
I took that when I was in my mid 20s. That's one medication that made me gain about 60 to 80 pounds in like 2 months.
Yeah, so they call these side effects. These
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
toxic effects of being poisoned by these
Hmm.
drugs.
Hmm.
You just call it what it is. These drugs are
Hmm.
toxic. They're poisonous.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
this is with the atypicals, and you're right. There's not it's the side effects are less, but the long term consequences are the same.
Yeah.
Skin rash, a feeling of restlessness with inability to sit still, constipation, dizziness, drowsiness, excessive salivation production, extrapyramidal disease, generalized weakness, headache, nausea, weight gain, chest pain, a fast heartbeat, uh, low potassium. Um, and you still get the central nervous system and the peripheral system damage from these drugs. And
Yeah.
again, they're not curing anything. You
Nothing.
know,
You get a subscriber for life, and there's the only thing they do maybe is like sedate an individual so that people don't have to you know deal with the person with the hallucination. That's it's like
yeah, that's
uh,
exactly right. It makes it
uh,
easier on the people who are watching over these
right,
guys. And
right.
now that started back in a long time ago. It was well before 1910, and it happened in Germany in a dye lab.
Hmm.
These people who were working in this dye lab with a certain kind of dye, they would get gorked out.
Hmm.
They go like zombies, and they were like, "Well, what's going on with this
Hmm.
stuff?" And then the French came over. I think it was Smith, Kline and French, or one of those major drug companies, and they isolated what it was that was gorking these workers out. And they saw it was like a major tranquilizer. It would just, put the skids on people. They just slow right down like a zombie. So they tried to use that in Europe, but back then the Freudians were running things, and they said, "No, you get your drugs out of here. We're not."
Unless if it's cocaine.
Yeah, unless it's cocaine like Freud. So they took it over to the United States. I don't remember where, but they took these major tranquilizers and they drugged down an entire psychiatric hospital. And they found that it was very easy to control these people then because they were like walking zombies. They weren't fighting, they weren't biting, they weren't howling and screeching and attacking. They were all calmed down, they all chilled out like zombies.
Yeah,
and that
like
was
the Thorazine shuffle, where people are just shuffle.
They drag their feet. I've seen it many times. So psychiatry was having a fight with neurology at the time, and they were losing badly as far as producing anything productive. So when they saw these drugs come out, they just went after them like a duck on a June bug, man. They just grabbed these drugs and brought them under their control. Nobody else can get these out because you have to have specific psychiatric knowledge to do with these drugs. Yeah. They got people believing that.
Yeah, total bullshit.
And even the regular doctors believe that.
I know.
Yeah, they're hesitant to prescribe these drugs because they've been brainwashed to believe that, only psychiatrists can competently use them. I mean,
right. Yeah,
it's nuts.
The whole system's nuts. And then they've also now they started using that same playbook in the 80s with SSRIs and antidepressants, and it's just,
oh yeah. See, that's where the biochemical imbalance crap came from. Back in the 70s when they came out with Prozac, Eli Lilly was looking for something to convince people of why it worked.
No.
Okay? So they came up with this complete lie that had no backing whatsoever, saying that the mental illness was caused by a chemical imbalance of the brain. Okay?
Yep.
And that somehow these drugs balanced the brain. Okay, so that's one of the things I was brainwashed with after graduate school also. So, I ended up taking some of my patients to the psychiatrists on the, when they came and made their rounds. And I'd sit through some of those meetings and it would be like, okay, it's a chemical brain imbalance, but I watched how they operated. You bring the patient in, they ask them a few questions, usually not more than 15 or 20 minutes. Are you hearing voices? 10 minutes worth of questions. Okay, you're schizophrenic. And then right away, they would prescribe an antipsychotic drug. Now, if it was a chemical brain imbalance, wouldn't you think they would need to know what neurotransmitters were out of balance or by how much?
Right, exactly.
No, they never
and have some sort of test to measure the imbalance.
Right,
but there is no test to measure the imbalance.
That's exactly right.
Bullshit. It's
all bullshit. It was all made up by Eli Lilly, and the drug companies went, "Oh, well, that's cool. If it works for them, it'll work for us." So then all psychiatric illnesses became, and they don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be.
Right.
And you think if they did, they would have some kind of lab work or blood work or some kind of objective test or X-ray or something to measure what the balance of the neurotransmitters is.
It's completely subjective, the diagnoses. It's wild. I know. I'm sure you're probably familiar. I think what's his name, Rosenboom or whatever, and David Rosenboom. He was in Stanford in the 70s, where he was I believe he was a psychologist, and he sent a bunch of his graduate students to a psych ward, saying that they were hearing voices when they were completely healthy. And then they got diagnosed with schizophrenia and put into inpatient. And then as soon as they were admitted, they were totally fine and they denied any voices or whatever, but the hospitals wouldn't release them unless that
good
they
luck in
took the
getting them out.
medication. Because once you're diagnosed as psychotic, you can't remove the label, and nobody will ever take you
It's a
seriously.
very, very
Even though
dangerous label.
these were healthy graduate students, intelligent, healthy people who were just playing it. And then he did a follow-up study where he told the hospitals, no, okay, this time you know about this, so I'm going to send another cohort of students, and they'll be like, well, we'll catch the ones that are playing this time or whatever. You can't trick us twice, right? And so he's like, all right, I'm sending them. I won't tell you when I'm sending these people. And then they thought they had filtered out the people feigning schizophrenia, feigning psychosis. And they're like, haha, we did it. We caught your tricks. And he's like, well, I never sent any graduate students the second time. So they were, actually not diagnosing people who said that they were hearing voices, because just showing that it's completely subjective, the diagnosis. It's completely based on clinical reports that it's total crap. And then once you get diagnosed, you're diagnosed forever and nobody will ever take you seriously, even if you don't have psychosis.
Right. So, the drug companies found that there was something to do with serotonin. They determined that their antidepressants blocked serotonin reuptake. So it would increase the number of times that the nerve cells would fire. Okay. Right. So they came up with this bullcrap thing saying, oh yeah, it's got to do with the neurotransmitter serotonin. And they just put this out there with no good research. And here's a comprehensive review. It says via molecular psychiatry. It says our comprehensive review of the major strands of research on serotonin shows there is no convincing evidence depression is associated with or caused by lower serotonin concentrations or activity. Most studies found no evidence of reduced serotonin activity in people with depression compared with people without depression, and methods to reduce serotonin availability using tryptophan depletion do not consequently lower mood in volunteers. High-quality, well-powered genetic studies effectively exclude an association between genotypes related to the serotonin system and depression, including proposed interactions with stress. And then they go on. They found out later, it says antidepressants were worse than useless in treating depression in tandem with psychotherapy. It says the results showed that antidepressant exposure significantly increased the risk of suicide and suicide attempts when compared to no antidepressant usage among children and adolescents. Among antidepressant SSRI use was associated with an increased risk of suicide and suicide attempts. In addition, the risk of suicide and suicide attempts between SSRIs and other antidepressants was similar. So they're finding that these drugs not only didn't help,
they're making things worse.
They're making things worse.
And then there's also PSSD or whatever, where people have a lot of sexual dysfunction for life after these antidepressants, these SSRIs, and then now there's SNRIs where they're also saying, well, it's not just serotonin, it's norepinephrine too, and it's not based on any science. It's treated like it is.
This is the most deceptive discipline, if you want to call it, on the face of the planet. Here's another article. It says this is by Jeffrey Lacrosse. I believe he's a researcher, and he wrote he's presenting an article by Jonathan Leo, Serotonin and Depression, a disconnect between advertisements and the scientific literature. And this is the Psychiatric Journal of Medicine or something like that, November 2005. It says there's not a single peer-reviewed article that can be accurately cited to directly support claims that serotonin deficiency in any mental disorder, while there are many articles that present counter evidence. Ronald Pies, he said the demise of the chemical imbalance theory in view of the mounting evidence against it after more than 20 years of being told a chemical imbalance in the brain causes mental illness such as anxiety, depression, schizophrenia. The theory was finally put to rest when Dr. Paz, the editor-in-chief of Emeritus of Psychiatric Times, stated in July 11th, 2011, I don't believe I've ever heard a knowledgeable, well-trained psychiatrist make such preposterous claims as mental illness is caused by a chemical imbalance, except perhaps to mock it. In truth, the chemical imbalance notion was always a kind of urban legend, never a theory seriously propounded. It said the chemical imbalance theory is a sort of last century thinking. The truth is they don't have any idea what the chemical or neurotransmitter balance of the brain should be. So,
Well, I tell you, if there is an imbalance in neurotransmitters in the brain, it's due to pathogenic causes. It's not some sort of genetic thing. And my work ties in with that many mental health conditions are due to pathogenic, typically parasitic causes. It's treatment-resistant depression, bipolar. There's a strong, I don't know if you know the strong correlation between schizophrenia and toxoplasmosis, which is
I've heard there was one. I don't know how strong it was.
very, very significant. And so if that's the case, then you can treat the pathogenic cause rather than trying to replace the missing neurotransmitters. But they deny the pathogenic cause of many of these mental illnesses so that they can push these medications that are harming people rather than helping people, ruining people's lives and their pocketbooks,
Yeah. And it goes on and on and on. Here's one from the Cleveland Clinic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an article that says what causes schizophrenia. And it goes, experts suspect.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they started changing it to suspect, or it's believed that,
Right,
and they write these fancy articles.
right,
And
right.
one of the first things they wrote down is chemical imbalance of your brain. It says the chemicals involved in those that are in your brain that are used to communicate with brain cells. So here they are publishing this crap again, and this is the Cleveland Clinic.
Yeah.
So now they're changing their tune, like, oh, it is believed or it is thought that, but they're still pushing it, even though it's been denied. I mean, it's been proven bunk for 20 years now, and they're still pushing it to make their profit.
And their meta-analyses showing all these clinical trial studies that are completely bogus, and the big pharma companies, they cherry pick the data and they cherry pick the studies. Of course, they don't publish anything that contradicts the narrative, and but still with the meta-analyses, they still show that these medications don't help people. Of course, there's tremendous amount of literature showing all the catastrophic side effects, consequences that come from these medications, but that the doctors typically don't inform the patients about these consequences.
Oh no, I've watched them. They'll tell them the common effects. Oh, you're going to get dry mouth. Yeah, your vision is going to be blurred. You're going to feel sluggish. I mean, the main symptoms that are usually experienced. But boy, that talks into akinesia or any of those other things. The white blood cell counts going down, all that. It's completely skipped.
Yeah,
I've seen it over and over and over.
Why don't I give you these crazy powerful medications that are going to do all this damage? But hey, come and see me in 6 months. If there are any problems, just let me know then, or whatever. And by then, the damage is irreversible.
And that's reflected in the assault rate on psychiatrists also.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at this, according to the Journal of American Medical Association, the suicide rate for psychiatrists is 65 per 100,000, or 5.9 times higher than that of the general population, roughly equivalent to that of schizophrenic patients.
Yeah.
Now, ain't that interesting?
Very interesting. And another very interesting thing is that many medical doctors qualify for either malignant narcissism or psychopathy, and a lot of them are really attracted to psychiatry.
Yeah.
These dark predatory personalities that sort of prey on the vulnerable. Their personalities are innately attracted to prey on vulnerable people.
And then one of the things I noticed when I was working at Central State Hospital was that psychiatrists were constantly getting beat up. You know, it was like once every month or once every 2 months there was news of a psychiatric patient assaulting a psychiatrist. Now, it wasn't psychiatric nurses, it wasn't counselors, it wasn't psychologists, it wasn't, you know, the, the the assault rate on psychiatrists was roughly what it was on what do you call them, attendants that were on the
Right, right, right,
ward
right,
with
right,
these
right, right,
people
right. The
24 hours
orderlies
a day.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
orderlies.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
it was astronomical. And I'm like, well,
yeah,
what are they doing? What are they saying to these people that
yeah,
are causing this? But the
yeah.
assault rate upon a study involving 120,000 assaults from 1987 to 1992 over 5 years,
Mhm,
the assault
mhm.
rate for all jobs
Yeah,
was 12.6 per 1,000. The
yeah.
assault rate for doctors other than psychiatrists was 16.2 per thousand. The assault rate for custody staff, you know, these are attendants that were around these people 24 hours a day, was
Mhm,
69 per 1,000. The assault
mhm.
rate on psychiatrists for the very little time they were spending with these
Right, very
patients,
little time,
very little,
relative.
15,
Yeah,
20 minutes, was 65 uh, per 1,000, or 5.9 times that of the normal population.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Well,
so
it's warranted. I unfortunately in a lot of cases because these guys are doing great damage to the patient.
yeah, they
Um,
are.
you know,
And the patient,
if they cared about the patients wouldn't be lashing out at them. You know, it's um,
well,
yeah,
the psychiatric voices don't like them very well either.
right, exactly, exactly.
You know, but you look at, you know, the entire mental health system in the Western world, it revolves around these toxic, ineffective,
Hmm.
stupid drugs. You
Yeah,
know, and look, this is the report card. You know, the CDC reports that 132 people in the U.S. kill themselves every day. So
yeah.
keep in mind, we have more psychiatrists, we have more
Hmm.
psychologists,
Hmm.
we have more psychiatric medications on the planet
Hmm.
now than has
For
ever
sure.
existed in the history of mankind. And, you know, suicide is the 11th leading cause of for death in the U.S.
Hmm.
In 2021, 48,000 Americans killed themselves, and a great number of them were on antidepressant drugs.
Yes, sir.
And this,
And I believe it's the leading cause of death for people in their 20s today. Is suicide. You know.
I wouldn't be surprised. And most of them, a lot of these people are on antidepressant drugs.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, 50,000 people were killed, 50,000 soldiers were killed in the 10-year Vietnam War. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, this is close to 50,000 people in the U.S., you
Hmm.
know, killing themselves
This,
year after year after year after year after year. And their suicide rates are increasing
yeah,
with the use of these drugs.
yeah. That's a great analogy comparing it to the deaths in war because this is exactly what it is. It's war on the people.
Yeah.
These drugs are they're criminal acts.
Yeah. Now, if that many people had been killed, and if we were losing 50,000 people a year in a war,
Yeah.
that everybody be screaming and
Right.
hollering, you know,
Right.
hey, man, wait a minute, we can't afford
Yeah.
this, you know. But
Yeah.
no, this is quietly going on in
Yeah.
mental hospitals and mental institutions, mental health centers, you know, across the United States and the Western world.
Yeah.
You know, from
Yeah.
2006 to 2016, the suicide rate increased by 2% a year, with 1.4 million suicide attempts in 2017 and 47,000 deaths. Okay, and now that's not even a fraction of the suicide attempts.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
Oh, this was a, yeah, this was a 1.4 million suicide attempts in 2017, and
Wow.
47,000 deaths. Okay,
Wow.
so this is what the report card.
It's a crisis.
Yeah.
It's a crisis. Everybody should be alarmed. This is a scream for help and to change the system. And
So
yeah,
between 1999 and 2019, suicide rates increased 33%.
wow.
Schizophrenic suicide at a rate 3 to 5 times that of the general population, but so do psychiatrists.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
their suicide rate is equal to that of the most severe
yeah,
mentally ill portion of their population. You know,
yeah.
at
Well,
the same.
there's the old adage that people are attracted into working in the behavioral health field because they themselves are disturbed individuals. They
Well, I
are.
know I entered. I was looking for answers.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, at the same time, global antipsychotic drugs have soared to in 2021 $14.54 billion, estimated to reach 15.5 billion in 2022. Okay, now I hear there are 11 more than 11 billion is another statistic. Antidepressant markets expected to reach 15.98 billion by 2023, not million, billion. And these drugs are curing absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all. And then, of course, there are the benzodiazepines, and then there are the mood stabilizers for bipolar, and it just goes on and on and on. It's just mass prescribe, and nothing's being cured. Nobody's being healed.
Yeah,
It's tragic,
yeah.
man.
And that's not the only thing. This DSM that I'm sure they forced down your throat, like they
Oh yeah,
forced down
I
my
know it
throat.
inside out. Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
I created a video, a YouTube about a week ago, just tearing apart the DSM and how they put together the third edition. Basically, 12 guys sitting in a room going by consensus rather than science in 1980, and the third edition. And since then, it has scientific sounding language that
Oh yeah, it looks like a work of.
people assume it's built on science, but no, it's just built
It,
on consensus
when
of
you
one
open it,
echo chamber.
yeah, and
Yeah,
you look at it, and it's like all these categories and subcategories and
yeah,
numeric classification.
yeah.
It's all a bunch of bunk. It's all made up.
And then almost all of these conditions have overlapping symptoms, and
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
all these overlapping symptoms are symptoms of chronic untreated parasitic infections,
Well, they got
fatigue and brain fog, and it just all these things are symptoms of parasitic infection.
and there's not one recommendation for treatment in the entire thing. That's one of the first
Right.
things I noticed. So
Yeah.
1952, when the DSM
Yeah.
first came out, it was 106 psychiatric disorders.
Right.
Right. In
Yeah.
1980, it had ballooned to 256 psychiatric disorders.
Yeah.
Now the DSM-5 lists 297 psychiatric disorders, and they're all made up by this group of
And then
psychiatrists.
each disorder has like sub disorders. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
oh, sorry.
and numbers for billing for
Yeah,
insurance
right,
companies.
right. It's like how can we milk this? How can we build this? And how? Yeah. It's diabolical.
Yeah, and 2/3 of the psychiatrists are on the committee to come up with these new mental illnesses
Yeah,
are in league with big pharma.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
they're just making
absolutely.
stuff up that they think they can treat,
With the
with
pill.
some kind of pill that they make up.
And then again, another medication we haven't talked about, or group of medications, are psychostimulants: Adderall,
Oh
Ritalin,
yeah.
Vyvanse. These are all doing great damage, and they are. In my case, I in after graduate school in 2010, I got hooked on Adderall because my brain fog was so severe. But this was due to chronic inflammation in the brain that the medical establishment denied. And so Adderall would give me brief relief, but then that quickly led to tolerance and then dependence, and led down a real slippery slope, and really wrecked my life. Psychiatry is just purely evil, and so these stimulants. First of all, people are trained to think that healing comes from a pill, and then that you need to take a potent psychostimulant in order to just focus and concentrate, and then that opens up the door for illicit drug use later in
Yeah.
life.
And the
It's
prisons were
like, hey,
full.
you've already made the connection that I need a drug to be healthy. So, well, if any of these drugs aren't working to make me think or whatever function, then why don't I try something more powerful on the streets?
Yeah. And that's what happens. That the prisons are full of people who
Yeah.
started off on uh, these psychiatric drugs, and then so they started off with Adderall, Vyvanse, Ritalin,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
went, well, if this is good, more must be better.
Right. Right.
And I've seen more people go psychotic on amphetamines than any other
Hmm.
drug. I mean,
Absolutely.
they start off and they're going kind of, well, this feels good, and they
Hmm.
start hearing voices while they're
Hmm.
high, and they go, well, that's just a hallucination, and then it'll go away when I come down, and it does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it may do that for 10 times or 25
Yeah.
times or 50 times, and then one
Until it
day
doesn't. Yeah.
it does not, and they're
Yeah.
just as psychotic as any of
Yeah.
those mental patients
and
that
then
were in
and
the
then there's
hospital.
also seeing of shadow people and stuff on
Oh yeah, yeah,
and a big part of this is because people aren't eating and on these powerful stimulants, and they're not sleeping, and when they eat sugar and processed foods or whatever, and so it's just a recipe for disaster. No sleep,
yeah.
no healthy foods. They're hardly drinking any water, and they're just pumping themselves full of these dopamine spiking drugs that just it's just a recipe for disaster. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. And with kids, I mean, I got some old stats here with kids. These go back to 2017. But in
Yeah,
2017, more than 7.2 million kids were on psychiatric drugs.
yeah,
Over 622,000 were under the age of 5. Over There were over 80,000 kids on ADHD drugs. This is the meth,
yeah,
Ritalin,
yeah.
Adderall,
It is. Yeah,
Atarax.
it's not really any different from meth. It really isn't.
Over 38,000 kids were on antidepressants. Over 85,000 were on antipsychotics. They're giving these things to kids,
I
you
know.
know,
5-year-olds,
5-year-old
antipsychotics.
kids.
So, children should not be on drugs.
And over 389,000 were on anti-anxiety drugs, which are addictive.
Yeah. Oh,
You
they're
know,
horribly addictive, and
yeah,
you can die from the withdrawal if you don't. Yeah, yeah, it's they're benzo withdrawal is the worst addiction according to people I know than any other addiction to get off of. It takes people often years of tapering in order for their brains to heal from benzodiazepine addiction.
and right now, 25% of college students in America have received a diagnosis of some kind of mental disorder or on psychiatric drugs.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like signaling, like, oh yeah, I got to take my SNRI, or
Yeah,
got to take my Xanax, and it's people almost say it as like a badge of pride. Like today, it's very strange.
yeah.
Young people,
The
yeah,
National Alliance on Mental Illness reported approximately 1 in 5 adults in the U.S., 43.8 million, experience mental illness based on diagnoses given them through the DSM.
hmm,
And it's all made up.
it
It's
is. It is all made up. It's all largely made up. It's insane. It's insane times we live in, and it's not just mental illness. 70% of American adults today have at least one chronic illness. And so that's we didn't have these illnesses in the 50s. We just didn't have this epidemic of
no, there weren't.
depression
Yeah,
and anxiety. It wasn't We didn't have an anxiety problem until Valium came.
yeah.
It's an interesting. We didn't have a mass depression problem until Prozac and Zoloft came along. These are manufactured problems where you get the pharma solution. It's very psychopathic, the system.
Now, here's a whistleblower from Eli Lilly. He
Yeah.
says they are selling drugs to people under false premises, under a disease that's been invented. So, how do you measure the efficacy among a disease that doesn't even exist?
Yep.
You know, and there are no blood tests, there's no lab tests, there's no X-ray. The DSM is just a bunch of classes of behavior that a group of psychiatrists have voted to be a disease or disorder.
Yep,
So Dr.
exactly.
Dr.
And
Julian
and
Whitaker.
most, I guarantee you, most of those psychiatrists are dark personalities, malignant narcissists or psychopaths themselves.
Oh,
And you know, it's the system doesn't care about the patient. It just doesn't. It cares about profit and control, and that's psychopathic behavior. Pure and simple.
here's one on children again. So the number of children and adolescents in the U.S. on psychiatric drugs is over 7 million and growing.
Hmm. Yeah,
And,
it's scary. I worked with at-risk children, mostly boys, for a while, and they were all,
and on kids, over 1
yeah, on
million.
kids. Yeah.
1,194,805.
What was that number again for? What was
This
the
is for
population
this is for kids
on psych drug,
on antipsychotic drugs.
on antipsychotic drugs in
Antipsychotic
particular?
drugs. These are
Yeah.
drugs that cause mental damage.
Yeah. So
You know?
a boy has conduct disorders too unruly. You give them Seroquel to make them chill out, right?
Oh yeah, and you should see some of these other ones that they've added since we were in school.
Yeah.
Mathematics disorder. If you don't like
Mathematics.
math, yep, you don't like math like me. I can't stand math. You know, you're disordered. Caffeine intoxication disorder.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
drink
That's a good one.
too much caffeine, you're intoxicated. You're
Right.
you're, uh, you're disordered. Sibling
Yeah.
relational disorder. These are kids fighting with each other.
Yeah.
You know, that's a
Kids being
sibling
kids.
relational disorder.
Yeah.
You know, they got Florence syndrome, being overwhelmed by beauty, such as in Florence, Italy, and feigning dizziness. The treatment is antidepressant drugs.
Are you serious? I've never
That's
heard
what
of
they're.
that one.
Yep.
Really?
Florence syndrome, Paris syndrome, mostly experienced by Japanese visiting France. Symptoms include depression, anxiety, feelings of persecution, which in my day they would have called that cultural shock.
Right, exactly,
You know.
exactly. Are we still in reality? I just have to pinch myself every now and then and be like, how did we end up in this mess? It's because it's what it is, but it's more than a mess. It's warfare that
Oh
and
yeah, it's warfare against the population.
yeah, and we need to protect the children at all costs, the vulnerable, and that's and unfortunately, messages like these get throttled down and shadow banned by the system because the system doesn't want the truth being out there. But
Yeah.
they can't suppress it much longer, and it's really remarkable that how long you've been speaking out about this. And there's also Joanna Moncrief is an English psychiatrist who's been very strong critic of psychopharmacology who really opened my eyes to a lot of things years ago, and it's really phenomenal that so many people are just scared to step outside of the box and get demonized for looking at things
Oh
objectively.
yeah, I had to drop my license. You know,
I'm sure you did.
my formal, state license, because I knew they
Yeah,
would have came after me.
yeah,
They
yeah,
came after me in the prison when schizophrenics started recovering. It wasn't
right.
supposed to happen. I was doing
Yeah.
something wrong.
So,
You know.
so, and do you want to transition now and how you did help people with schizophrenia without medication?
Well, yeah, there were a number of things. There's on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. There's one free program that
Hmm.
anybody that has obsessive compulsive thoughts or schizophrenia, there's a I think it's 4 section program called That's a Lie program. It's totally
Hmm.
free. It's on the
Hmm.
first page of
That's great.
my website. Okay. Um, then what I was doing then was studying the voices that
Yeah.
that schizophrenics were hearing, and I saw that they were running patterns. You know,
Mhm.
and here's psychiatry saying, oh, these things are auditory hallucinations, you know. But when I saw that they were running patterns, that flew in the face of everything psychiatry was saying, you
Sure.
know. So the first pattern I saw that they were completely negative, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now it took me a while to get their trust because, like you, I mean, you know, if you worked on the psych wards, you were kind of the spy, you know, you watched
Sure.
over the population, and anybody getting out of line, you'd have to turn into psychiatry to get drugged.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So the population wasn't very trusting of psychiatrists or people like me that
Mm-hmm.
were kind of on the front lines all the time. You know, so it took me probably a year and a half to get them to trust me. Uh, and, you know, they started telling me about what these voices were telling them. And it was all consistently negative. It was derogatory, it was insulting, it was abusive, it was destructive.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Um, it was just nasty stuff, but it was consistent.
Yeah.
It wasn't like hallucinations. Now, working in the emergency room for 10 years, I've seen my share of hallucinations. They were all over the place. You know,
Yeah.
they were positive, they were negative, they were everything in between. You know, there was no pattern to them. They were unpredictable, but the voices were very predictable. They were consistently negative. My first question was, what holds them on a consistently negative course? Why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? So
Right.
it's like, okay, here's psychiatry lying again, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So
Mm-hmm.
I also found that they were anti-religious. I had one patient at the hospital come in one day and said, the voices were attacking me last night. And I just kept repeating the 23rd Psalm, and they reacted like worms thrown
Mm-hmm.
on a hot frying
Mm-hmm.
pan.
Mm-hmm.
So I went,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's interesting. So I
Mm-hmm.
started handing out the 23rd Psalm to a bunch of other schizophrenic patients on the
Mm-hmm.
ward and
Mm-hmm.
said, you know, use this for a week and come back and tell me how the
Yeah.
voices reacted.
Yeah.
The voices always reacted negatively. They
Sure.
hated it. They tried
Yeah.
to make the guy stop saying it. You
Yeah.
know, they threw tantrums. So I'm like, a hallucination that's anti-religious, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And you could try these things for yourself. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
on my website again at jerrymarzinsky.com, go to articles, and under articles, here's a whole list of these 23 patterns that these
Mm-hmm.
voices are running
Mm-hmm.
predictably,
Mm-hmm.
repeatedly. They're not hallucinations. They're running
Right.
patterns over and over and
Right.
over again. They foster and create negative emotion. That's what they
Yeah.
want to do. That's why they're always telling them negative stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
once that negative emotion is created, they drain the person, and their
Yeah.
energy level just drops down to nothing.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And it crashed. Yeah.
And they crash. So
Yeah.
here's, I'm just going to quickly go through some of these. They get louder after sunset consistently. The
Mm-hmm.
schizophrenics would complain as soon as the sun goes down, they get
Mm-hmm.
worse.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a hallucination do that?
Do
You
that.
know, they get louder when ignored.
Yeah.
You know, they foster self-destructive behavior. They're always telling the person to hurt themselves or somebody else, or to sabotage themselves. They foster isolation. They want the person to lock themselves in the bedroom and not to listen to anybody or converse with anybody other than the voices. Okay. So they demand attention. You can't ignore them. I remember sitting in the psychiatrist's office once where the psychiatrist was telling them, oh, these things are just hallucinations. Just ignore them, you know.
Yeah.
And I brought that guy in a week later and I said, I was in there with you when the psychiatrist told you to ignore them. How did that work for you? He said, no, it didn't work at all. They got worse. So I started giving that advice too, and then bringing the patients back in. How did the voices react to being ignored? They got louder. They
Yeah.
would refuse to be ignored. They gaslit. They manipulated perception. They have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. They can bring up every rotten thing that person ever did and rub it in their face until they turn
Right.
their thoughts negative, and they
Right.
start generating this negative emotion that they feed off of.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want anybody to know about them, so they tell the patient not to tell anybody about them. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're consummate liars. They lie about everything. You can't believe anything they say. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they consistently steer the patients away from any joy or anything that's pleasant. They can manipulate feeling. They can short circuit reasoning, and it goes on and on and on. So any of you guys who are working with schizophrenics out there, go to my website and get this thing and ask your schizophrenics if this isn't true. You know.
Yeah.
Now I got in trouble for asking um, schizophrenics when I was at the state hospital. One of them went to one of the psychiatrists and said, "Listen, this guy's asking me questions about the voices, and I don't like it. He's upsetting me." Next morning, I got pulled in front of that psychiatrist, and he's telling me, "Stop asking these people questions about the voices. They're hallucinations. All you're doing is upsetting them. You're making them worse." You
Hmm.
know, and I knew that was bullcrap at the time, but you
Yeah.
can't argue with these people. They're just so
Yeah.
egotistical and out of control,
That power hungry and
power
yeah,
hungry. They'll
yeah,
just run you over.
dominant. Yeah, assert their dominance. They many of these psychiatrists have god complexes, and
Yeah, yeah.
they're
Not
yeah,
all of them, but a good many of them.
yeah, yeah. No, some of them are really great people, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah,
not
yeah,
the majority aren't. Is what I found.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I was looking for what was the cause of schizophrenia, and it became very clear that it was the voices.
yeah.
Okay, so what I started doing was throwing a wrench in the works with the patterns that they were running. I'm kind of going, what would happen if these patterns were disrupted?
Mm-hmm.
Telling them to do the opposite of what the voices were telling them. Okay.
Sure.
Um, telling them to, read the Bible or study religious stuff or something spiritual, which the
Yeah.
voices were totally opposed against.
Right.
So repeat the 23rd Psalm, repeat the 91st Psalm, do the opposite of what they like. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I couldn't do that at the state hospital because, they're not set up to deal with violence. Okay.
Yeah.
And schizophrenics were, when they went off, they caused a lot of trouble and there wasn't any security staff there. Either the attendants would have to wrestle them down or we'd have to wrestle them down or the nurses would have to give them a shot. It would cause a lot of disruption. So the unwritten rule at the state hospital was don't do anything to upset schizophrenics that you don't have to do.
Right.
But when I got out of there and took a job in the psychology department of the state prison, it's a totally different story. You know, if one of the schizophrenics went to the warden or the captain or something and said, "Hey, this psych guy's asking me questions about the voices and I don't like it," they'd say, "Get out of my office, complain to traffic."
Yeah.
Get
Right.
out there,
Right.
It wouldn't even hit the level of concern. I mean, they just
Right.
would just get out of my face. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know. So what I had was a group of schizophrenics that I agreed, and it was ones that I'd spoken to and kind of trusted, and said, "I'll do everything I can to help you, but I want you to tell me in real time what the voices are telling you."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we had an agreement to that. So that worked out pretty well. And after a while, they started, and I was telling them to do the opposite of what the voices were telling them to do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they were coming
Mm-hmm.
back and saying the voices are really getting pissed at you. They don't want us coming here. They
Mm-hmm.
complain every time we come to your office. They start screaming. They want me to turn back. They don't want me to get out of bed. They tell me that you're crazy. You're stupid. Stay away. Not one of them broke away for that reason.
Yeah.
They all kept coming.
Yeah.
So after a while, one after another, and these were inmates that they didn't know each other. I didn't work with them in a group setting. It was just one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And they started coming into me one at a time saying the voices don't like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want us coming here. Yeah. So whatever, the voices weren't happy with that. And I'm figuring anything the voices aren't happy with is good.
That's good. Do the opposite. Yeah.
It's the opposite,
Yeah.
So then this started escalating, um, after a month or two, one guy came. I don't know how he got into the medical unit, but he knocked on my door and he said, "The voices want to talk to you." And they want to talk to me personally? He said, "Yeah, they want to talk to you personally." And that had never happened before. It was always like the prisoner was the intermediate, the patient was, they would tell me what the voices were telling them. And then I would tell them what to tell the voices. They were always the middleman. Now these things wanted direct communication with me. And that blew me away,
Yeah.
and I didn't fully believe these things were before that point, I didn't fully believe these things were evil spirits or dark entities. I
Hmm.
thought they had something to do with the brain or subconscious or something like that. I kept denying it. I mean, anybody else who had as much evidence that I had would certainly have gone, well, these things are spiritual entities. I didn't want
Yeah.
to believe it. I didn't want to
Yeah.
believe in,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I asked this guy in. I said, "Hey, all right, have a seat." Close the door, and I said, what do they got to say?" And these words came out of his mouth. Said, "You have no right to interfere with our way of life. Our way of life,
Hmm.
plural."
Hmm.
And the prisoner goes, "Those weren't my words. Honest to
Yeah.
God, I didn't
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
That came from the voices, you
Mm.
know." So I said, "Well, tell them this or something." He said,
Yeah.
I don't have to tell them anything. They can see you. They can hear you,
Hmm.
you know, they directly, and that blew me away,
Yeah.
because before that, I'm thinking, well, I have to go through them for them to hear me, for the
Right.
patient, but no, it was a direct thing. They were, after he walked out, I knew with no uncertainty that these things were entities. These were negative
Hmm.
entities.
Hmm.
They belong to a spiritual class of stuff that drugs don't affect.
Don't touch. Do
They
not help.
don't
And matter
touch.
matter of fact, the drugs would probably make things worse because they
Yes.
make us so numb that
Yes.
it's going to disconnect
Well,
you from God and
it does that, but the voices don't like the drugs either because
yeah.
they can't, once they're drugged up, they can't get the
Yeah.
patient upset like they could
Mm.
before.
Can't rile them up. Yeah.
So they can't rile them up, so they can't suck as much energy out of them.
Right. And
So
that's what they want is the
that's what
energy.
they want. That's why they don't like psychiatrists.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so that blew me away. That was the point where I went, these things are entities. Drugs aren't going to
Hmm.
touch them. There's,
Hmm.
talking isn't going to touch them.
Right.
These things are in a totally different class,
Yeah.
and they're,
Yeah.
the psychiatric mafia has them, the whole planet believing that they are, hallucinations,
Right.
but
Right.
and that
They're
they
demons.
have to take
Yeah.
they have to take drugs to get rid of them, but
Yeah.
those drugs don't get rid of them. They might
Yeah.
quiet them down, and
Yeah.
if the voices do disappear as soon as the drugs stop, they start right back up again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these drugs aren't curing anything. You can't
No.
cure a spiritual disorder with a physical drug.
Absolutely.
So this kept going on and on and on, and this guy came back later, and what I was reading was a book by Miguel Ruiz, who was a South American shaman, or South American shaman, and he was writing about these things being energy vampires.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so I was constantly asking these schizophrenics questions. I was always badgering them with all kinds of questions, and then try this and come back in a week and tell me how it worked, and then try something else and come back in a week and tell
Hmm.
me how. I was constantly experimenting,
Hmm.
constantly had
Hmm.
something going on.
Hmm.
So I had this paragraph from Miguel Ruiz's writings talking about these things being energetic vampires. So I
Hmm.
had one of my patients come in, one of the prisoners, and I don't remember it was the same guy that told me that these things were. I didn't have any right to interfere, but I didn't stop interfering. Okay,
Hmm.
so I think it might have been, but I'm not sure at this point. I can't remember. But I brought this guy in, closed the door, and I said, "Here, I got something. I want to read this to you, and you tell me what you think." Okay. So I started reading, and it got to the point where they were saying these things are energetic vampires. They're sucking your energy. And this guy, I mean, he just turned into a zombie. He just sat there, and he's staring at me with these eyes that weren't like his normal eyes, and he's just staring at me. And I asked him the question, he doesn't respond. And then a few seconds later, this loud electrical crackling erupted from behind my chair. And it
Hmm.
sounded exactly like an arc welder. It was like crack, crack,
Hmm.
crack, crack, crack. And it started moving over to the wall, the right hand wall, and it started cracking up the wall. And I'm like, what the blazes is that? And I didn't see anything. I didn't smell
Yeah.
anything, but you
Yeah.
could hear it move, and it was
Really?
loud, and it just
Huh.
kept going. And
Huh.
I look at the guy and I said, "Do you hear that?" And he doesn't answer anything. He's just sitting there staring
Yeah.
at me with this blank stare.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking he's going to attack me. So I pulled my
Right.
chair back against the wall so I could kick him back if I had to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that thing just keeps crackling all the way up that right hand wall, up to the ceiling, and then it
Uh-huh.
starts crackling. So it wasn't like just a little blurb. This went
Yeah.
on for minutes. And
Huh.
then it crackled across the ceiling while over
Uh-huh.
top of him.
Uh-huh.
And I'm still looking, switching my attention between him and this crackling,
Yeah. Sure.
because I'm afraid he's going to attack. And I'm trying to see
Yeah.
what this crackling is, but I couldn't
Yeah.
see anything. I couldn't
Yeah.
smell anything. I could
Yeah.
hear it. I could hear it move. It was loud. It was as
Uh-huh.
loud as an electrical arc welder.
Yeah.
And then it starts crackling down the left hand wall. And then
Uh-huh.
it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can right next to my leg. And I'm like weirded out. It was like
Yeah.
Outer Limits, do 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 do
Yeah.
do do. And I
Yeah.
look in that trash can, and there's nothing there. There's
Wow.
absolutely nothing there. There's not even a piece
Wow.
of paper there. The inmate porter had cleaned it the night before. There's
Huh.
nothing there, you
Huh.
know. And then it just boomed, just like that. As fast as it came, it stopped.
Really?
And I look up from the trash can. I look at this guy, and he's slowly getting up, and he goes, "I gotta leave," and he shuffles out of my office.
Yeah.
He doesn't walk; he
Uh-huh.
shuffles,
Yeah.
and then he
Yeah.
goes down the hall, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, get out of here, go, go,
Yeah.
go." And I'm in shock. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in as big a shock as I was the first time, and I have no explanation for this. I look at the walls. I don't see any burn mark at the walls or ceilings. I go out into the hall to see if there's any possible explanation at all. The
Mhm.
nurse isn't in yet. The doctor isn't in yet. There's nobody on the hallway where
Yeah.
where the medical offices are. There's
Yeah.
no explanation for this.
Yeah.
So I sat staring out the window,
Mm-hmm.
in shock, going, because I felt that these things were, the voices were non-physical and they couldn't affect physical matter.
Right.
If they could crackle like that, they can affect physical matter.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
making a sound. And then
Yeah.
in my mind was like, okay, if they can do that, what else can they do? How
Sure.
else can they affect physical matter?
Sure.
And I've seen prisoners who would come into my office with scratches across their back, like the four fingers, like this,
Uh-huh.
like something had just ripped them open
Uh-huh.
in the back, and they said the voices did that. And one guy asked me, "You want to see it?" And I said, "Yeah, show." And he pulled up his shirt, and sure enough,
Yeah.
four finger marks slashed right
Wow.
across his
Like
back.
Wolverine, kind of
Yep,
just like.
yep. Now, if that had been another inmate, there would have been a fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no
Yeah.
other marks on him, just those four
Yeah.
marks.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, what am I getting into here?
Yeah.
Where is this all going? I didn't have any cognitive map. They sure as blazes didn't cover like anything like this in the PhD program or the
No.
master's program.
No.
It was like not in that realm of reality at all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, I have no cognitive map. Where's this going?
Yeah.
Where's this all going?
Yeah.
So it took me about 3 or 4 months to call that guy back in.
Uh-huh.
So I called him back in, and I figured he'd be a mess. He wouldn't have any energy. He'd be depressed.
Yeah.
He'd be a total mess.
Yeah.
And he showed up at my door, and he was bright and chipper. He looked like he did when I was working with him earlier, before this all happened.
Yeah.
And he comes in, and we did some small talk, and I said, "Hey, sit down." And I asked him after a while, I said, "Did you hear that crackling the last time you were in here in my
Uh-huh.
office?" And he said, "Yeah, I heard it." But he said, "I was surprised you heard it." And I went, and that there was a great relief there because somebody else had heard it beside
heard
me.
it.
Even
Yeah.
if it was a schizophrenic guy,
Sure.
at least he
Sure.
heard it.
Sure.
So I was
Yeah.
starting to think I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
schizophrenia germ or something. It's getting
Yeah.
me now.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
starting to lose it.
Right.
So I was doubting my own sanity, and when he said
Huh.
that was like a great relief because this is building, getting more and more intense step by step.
Right.
Okay. So he said, I was surprised you heard them. And I asked him, and what was that? He said, that was the voices. And I said, what were they trying to do? He said, they were trying to scare you off. And I
Uh,
said, well, they did a damn good job of it. You know?
ah,
And then I asked him, I said, you looked like a freaking zombie when you walked out of my office that day. I said, what
mhm,
were the voices telling you when you were
mhm.
walking out of my office? He said, they were telling me to go get a shank and stick it in your gut, which is a homemade prison knife.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I went, oh, he wouldn't do that. I've been working with him for 6 months and he was getting somewhat better, you know.
Hmm.
And I asked him, I said, well, why didn't you do it? He looked me in the eye and he said, I couldn't find one and nobody would give me one.
Oh,
So I'm like,
that's quite
whoa.
an answer.
Yeah. I'm like, where is this going? You
Right,
know?
right.
And it was spooky, you know?
Wow.
So thank heaven, I was an adrenaline junkie. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
motorcycles,
yeah,
airplanes,
yeah,
scuba
yeah,
diving,
yeah,
mountain climbing out there. So
yeah,
it was quite an adrenaline surge
yeah.
dealing with these guys.
Yeah.
These are people who seriously hurt people on the outside.
Right.
So it was like a weird, uh, it's a weird place to get your adrenaline surges.
Sure. Yeah. A very unusual place to get your adrenaline
Yeah,
surge.
but it
Yeah.
worked. I
It's
mean,
like
it
doing
worked.
exorcisms or
Yeah,
something,
and it was
like
like they were too much of a surge.
yeah, too much. The
Too much.
voices.
I've got overdose,
Right, right,
overdose.
right, 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 right.
It's like
You
great.
need to take a Xanax after one of those
Oh yeah,
encounters.
yeah. I did. I sat there staring out. I didn't see anybody that day. Locked my office. I sat there staring out the window. Like, where's this going? What's happening? It was like
Yeah,
I was in shock. I was in total shock.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So, you know, one by one, some of these things came up, and these schizophrenics started recovering. One at a time, not
Uh-huh.
many, but they
Uh-huh.
would get better with the That's a
Yeah,
Lie program that I told you about.
yeah,
You can get on my
yeah,
website. That helped a
yeah,
lot. Some other
yeah,
things, talking to them and letting them know what these voices were, how they worked,
yeah,
what they did, you could expect out of them. So
yeah,
it's like they felt somebody finally understood.
yeah.
And then, the entire time I was looking for some kind of effective psychotherapy that would
Yeah.
work with these guys, and there wasn't anything that worked well. I was getting some total cures, not many,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
in between,
But that's
they were
incredible that you were
sporadic,
getting some.
but
Yeah.
it was better than what psychiatry was getting, you know. So when these guys started recovering in the prison, and they were telling psychiatrists, "Hey, I don't need these drugs anymore. I'm fine,"
Yeah.
and then the psychiatrist was going, "Well, what's going on? You're supposed to be
Yeah.
psychotic for the rest of your life."
Yeah.
Now I was
Yeah.
working with this guy, this psych guy, and we got rid of them. So after that
Yeah.
happened, a few more times, a few more prisoners completely recovered.
Hmm.
That hit the chief psychologist, my
Hmm.
direct supervisor.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he was going, "Hey, something ain't right here.
Yeah.
These people aren't supposed to recover." So
Right.
he,
Right.
so he,
That's not what the DSM says.
That's not what the
That should
DSM
happen.
says. That's not what graduate school says. This ain't supposed
Yeah.
to happen. This
Yeah.
guy's doing something bad,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was thinking, hey, it's like they're paying $6,000 a month or something for thousands of dollars a month for these antipsychotic drugs, and the
Yeah.
psychiatrist to dish them
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000.
Yeah.
Between the psychiatrist and the medicines and all the
Oh,
stuff
easy.
involved with it. And I was thinking they'd be thrilled.
Yeah. You would
No,
think, but no,
no,
they don't
no,
want to solve any problems. They
no,
want to
no.
perpetuate the broken system.
They were pacing back and forth like demons.
Yeah.
They were pulling
Yeah.
each one of these guys up
Yeah.
who recovered and
Yeah.
grilling them. What
Yeah.
happened? What was he doing
Yeah.
in there? What was he saying to you? What was he doing with you?
Right.
Da, 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 da.
Right.
And they knew
Right.
what was going on, so they didn't tell him anything.
Uh-huh. Good.
They were wise to it. Then they
Yeah.
found this one guy who fully recovered, who had a um, valid MMPI, which is their gold standard test for psychology.
Personality. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That
Personality.
showed that he was high on the psychotic scale. So when he entered the prison, He was
Mm-hmm.
psychotic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked him, what's this guy doing with you in his office meetings? He knew what they were doing. He didn't tell them anything. He just said, he's helping us, not like you, asshole. He told the investigator
Yeah.
guy, and
Right.
that really torqued him off.
Sure.
So, so,
Sure.
so this
Undermine their
psychologist,
authority and their
yep,
egos.
this
Yeah.
psychologist said, okay, I got a MMPI from you. When you got into prison, would you be willing to take another one?
Yeah.
And the prisoner said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take another one." And he
Yeah.
took it, and the
Yeah.
psychotic scale was not
Nothing.
there, nothing.
Wow.
You know,
Incredible.
so it
And,
backed
and
up.
and you can't really fib an MMPI. You can't lie on it or whatever. So it has great validity
Hmm.
in measuring those scales. Yeah.
So that made them worse.
Yeah.
That made the
Yeah. Yeah.
investigators worst.
Sure. Sure.
Then they were
You would think that people would be dancing in the streets saying, "Oh
no,
my God, we
no.
can actually help people with schizophrenia," but instead,
It was the exact opposite, man. They
yeah,
put me under investigation. They were
yeah,
watching everything I did. They were watching
yeah,
every friggin' note I
mhm,
made in the medical records. I
mhm,
mean, it was just it was
mhm,
hell. You know.
yeah, yeah,
Finally, I got close to the time I could retire, and I hit the ejection seat, blew out of there.
yeah, yeah,
But I was still searching for an effective psychotherapy,
yeah,
and for years and years there was none. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden, this guy writes me, and he tells me, "Hey, listen, there's somebody I need you to meet. At
mhm,
worst, she would be a jolly old lady, you
mhm,
know." And by then, I had found something called the Mace Energy Method, and I read two of his books, and I went, "This guy's onto something." Okay?
mhm,
And then it turned out that this jolly old lady was the
mhm,
chief trainer for the Mace Energy Method in Australia.
mhm,
And I had a long talk with her because
mhm,
this system was working better than anything I'd seen in my entire career. And it was
mhm,
fast, and it
mhm,
was accurate, and it
mhm.
yielded permanent results, and it helped make schizophrenics better. Even though it didn't totally get rid of the voices, it got rid of the negative garbage that the voices were
Right,
feeding off of.
which
So
is incredible.
it weakened
Yeah,
the voices.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
And it wasn't a talk therapy, it was an
yeah.
energetic therapy, a
Uh-huh,
psychoenergetic therapy. So it worked
uh-huh,
with energy.
uh-huh.
you know so your
Yeah,
mind is energy, your spirit is
yeah.
energy, your
Everything's
feelings are
energy.
energy, everything's
Yeah,
energy.
everything's
And
energy.
John
Yeah.
Mace wasn't a psychologist or psychiatrist. He was a ship captain. He drove
Uh-huh,
these big freighters back and forth
uh-huh,
across the ocean. So
uh-huh.
he had to be familiar with all different kinds of energy: magnetic
Sure,
energy,
sure. Yeah, electrical, magnetic. Yeah,
electrical
yeah, yeah,
energy,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
tides
Solar,
and,
whatever.
and,
Yeah.
and magnetic
Yeah.
and compasses
Lunar.
and
Yeah.
all these different kinds of energy.
Sure.
And he applied that to the human being
Yeah.
and started experimenting with it
Uh-huh.
and found that, yes, there was a way to get at that negative energy that was trapped
Yeah.
in the subconscious.
Yeah.
So he found that when there's a trauma, there's a real bad feeling that happens with that trauma. And at the same time that trauma is happening, because it's happening to you, the person makes a decision as to what part they played in that trauma and who they are as a result of it. Okay? And that stays there for a long time. And then the ego shows up and goes, "Hey, you're not doing good with this. You're dwelling on it all the time. You're miserable. It's interfering
Mm-hmm.
with your functioning. Let me deal with this." So it
Mm-hmm.
takes it and it throws it into your subconscious mind and it locks it down. But it's not
Right.
dead, it's still
It's not
alive.
dead. It's yeah. Yeah.
So now at that point, it becomes like a mind virus, like a
Mm-hmm.
computer virus,
Mm-hmm.
where you can't see the virus itself, but you see the effect it's having on the screen.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
this is like a computer virus. It's negative energy. It's
Mm-hmm.
trapped. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's now not being set off constantly. It's not in your face constantly, but now it's like a landmine. So
Yeah.
what
That's
happens?
exactly what trauma is. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What happens now is that it's sitting there waiting to go off, and it is
Mm-hmm.
triggered by somebody who is similar to the person who caused that trauma in the first place. As soon
Mm-hmm.
as somebody shows up into the person's life circumstances who are like that person who traumatized them, that thing blows.
Blows.
And it tells
Explodes.
the
Yeah.
person either attack them or run
Mm-hmm.
away from them or get away from them,
Mm-hmm.
avoid them.
Fight
you
or
know,
flight or fawn. Yeah.
fight or flight right away.
Yeah.
So it's projecting outward, saying it's them, it's them, it's them outward when it's not. It's actually this body of negative
Yeah.
energy that's
Yeah.
trapped there. And
Yeah.
it affects what these people think. It affects what they say, what they don't say, what they do, what they don't do,
Sure.
their whole outlook on life. I mean, so it's like a mind virus, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
trapped there, and it's
Yeah.
negative energy that stays there, but it's not.
Mhm.
They're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Mace found that the mind doesn't work like they told us in psychology.
Oh, definitely
It,
doesn't.
it basically just takes pictures of where you put your attention. It's the
Hmm.
spirit that does
Hmm.
the rationalizing, the thinking, the
Hmm.
judging, all the stuff that you attribute to the mind. So the
Yeah.
mind only takes pictures, but it can also take pictures of stuff that is not tangible, like thoughts, memories,
Hmm.
feelings.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And once you can turn that into a picture, once you get rid of the picture, that negative identity that's attached to it
Hmm.
disappears also. So it's basically like getting a car battery, draining it down to nothing. And once all the electricity is gone, that battery's dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Mace has a way of connecting the spirit to this body of negative energy, which then
Hmm.
transposes it. Since
Hmm.
energy flows, one of the things he learned was energy flows from negative to positive. The spirit's
Hmm.
positive. If you can make
Hmm.
that connection,
Yeah.
then the spirit will actually transform that negative energy into positive energy.
Hmm.
That body of negative energy will be drained and it will not be there anymore.
Yeah.
And when a
Yeah.
person comes out of it, and this all happens within an hour,
Yeah.
they come out of it and they say they feel lighter,
Yeah.
they see brighter, they feel better, they don't
Hmm.
feel that weight on their shoulders, they feel more stable, and this
Hmm.
happens and that's permanent results.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know,
It's phenomenal.
but
Phenomenal.
they don't
And
want
and
that
and
out there either. This is a,
exactly. And then there's also profound healing through acoustics, and this is information that has also been suppressed is through right frequencies and other things that will have profound implications, not just in the treatment of trauma and what we deem as mental illness, but also disease like chronic and acute illnesses as well. That there's this was known centuries ago, but people like Rockefeller over the time or whatever have suppressed this
oh yeah,
information.
yeah. See,
Because
that's one thing
yeah,
about Mace. You don't have to go to college to deal
yeah,
with it to
yeah,
get certified. I
right,
mean, you
right,
don't have to. Like this friggin' license I still have hanging on my wall collecting dust. You don't have
yeah,
to subject yourself to this board of examiners
right,
bullcrap.
right, right,
You
right,
don't
right, right,
have to
right.
pay dues every
Yeah,
friggin'
yeah, 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 yeah.
month. You don't have to go up
Yeah.
before this board. You don't have to
Continuing
go to
classes,
continual,
courses.
constant, endless continuing education. All that's out of all you got to want to do is help people. You know,
It's amazing,
it's amazing, and it's
phenomenal.
anybody interested. It's causism
Hmm.
institute.com.
Yeah, yeah.
Go there and you can get trained to be more effective than any psychiatrist or psychologist out there in 6 months.
Yeah. Is that linked on your website? That website, the
I
Mace
think
training.
it is, but it's causism CAUSISM
Okay.
institute.com.
Okay.
Okay. So they call it causism because it gets to the cause of these
The root
mental
cause.
disorders. It
It's
gets
just
rid
what
of
we
the
need to
cause,
do. Right, right, right,
you
right,
know.
right, right.
And
And the
psychiatry,
same thing will happen with right frequencies and acoustic healing as
yeah,
well. It's
yeah.
getting to the
And they
root
don't want
cause.
any of this out there.
No, they don't. They don't. Or the potential benefits of psilocybin or
Yep.
other
Yep.
hallucinogens that DMT and ibogaine
Yep. Yep.
that
None of
are
that.
showing profound people relief from like heroin and addiction or whatever. Just amazing success rates on one ibogaine treatment. No, they want people on Suboxone or methadone for life.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And,
It's
yeah,
something that they can sell.
yeah, exactly. Something they
If
can
they
market and
can't
sell.
sell it, they have no use for it.
And a cured person is a one less person you can control as well. So it's not just
Oh
about
yeah.
profit; it's also
Yeah.
about keeping people down. and
Yeah.
defend it.
Oh, yeah, it is. They're
Yeah.
drugging millions of people all over the world,
Oh,
drugging them
yeah,
down.
yeah,
They
hundreds of millions.
turning them into zombies.
Yeah,
Millions.
yeah. It's all intentional. It's all
Oh,
it's
yeah,
evil.
yeah.
It's pure evil.
It is. It's very dark.
Yeah, yeah,
And they've
yeah.
got the whole Western world convinced that this is the way to go.
Yeah, and a lot of the developing world starting to follow suit. They're getting their doctors are being trained by these Western medicine doctors, and
Yep, yep.
it's all coming downstream. And these are all top down problems. Nobody after World War II, the United States moved from a model of curing disease to just treating symptoms,
Yep.
be
Yeah.
it physical illness or mental illness. And
Well, that's interesting because you look in the past 100 years, how many different diseases they have found actual cures for. But
yeah,
in the same 100 years, how many cures has psychiatry found for mental illness? Cures.
none,
They get rid of it.
none.
None.
None,
Zero.
none.
None. Not
Instead, they
one.
they throw out lobotomies and ECT and antipsychotic medications, SSRIs, SNRIs, mood stabilizers, Adderall. It's just none of them help
It's a
long
giant
term.
scam. It's a
Yeah, it's
giant
a huge
scam.
scam.
They're just
It's a
treating
complete
symptoms.
scam. Yeah, it's warfare on the people.
It is. They're not
And
getting at
and
the
and
cause of anything.
and then once these people who are taking these medications, then they get blamed for not getting better rather than the system being at fault for the patient not getting any
Oh
better.
yeah, you're not
And
taking your
so
drugs every day. You're
so
skipping
so
them.
the patient is blamed. They're not getting better or whatever, and they're paying an arm and a leg for these medications, and then they have to go to doctors meeting after doctors meeting. It's a huge scam.
Yeah.
And then that obviously destroys the quality of their personal life, the quality of their career life. It's just the entire medical establishment a scam. Not entire, but most of it.
Hmm.
The majority of medicine today is a scam, but psychiatry is the biggest offender.
Well, I wrote a book with Sherry Sweeney, she heard voices when she was a young kid.
Yeah.
And she came up with the That's a Lie program, which she
Mhm.
cured herself with, which is free on my website, again at jerrymarzinsky.com. We
Mhm.
wrote this book together.
Oh, awesome.
And this exposes the scam of psychiatry and the lie
Awesome.
that these voices are auditory hallucinations.
Right.
And this is how we came to that conclusion. It's
Yeah.
all in there with all the references and all the, you know, everything, the proof
That is
that this
fantastic.
is a scam.
I really, when I get the chance, I will purchase it and read it. And I encourage everybody else listening to educate yourself with people that have been on the forefront, looking outside of the confined boxes that society keeps us trapped in for profit and control.
Yeah. Yep. It's a huge scam.
Yeah.
Don't
I
fall
agree.
for it. If you feel you need a psychiatrist, go to Causism Institute and find yourself a therapist there.
Yeah.
Or you can go to my website, but
Yeah.
don't be taking this crap. It's like I have client after client after client who, when we finish a session, I tell them, had you gone to psychiatry, you would have been given an antipsychotic. You would have been given an antidepressant. And they feel whatever's bothering them is gone.
Mm-hmm.
You would have been drugged silly. So
Yeah.
before
Instead,
you go to a
cured in
psychiatrist,
an hour, right?
Yep. Before you go to a psychiatrist, go to causisminstitute.com and find yourself a MACE therapist
Cool.
before
Very
you sign up for one of those guys, because they're going to
Yeah.
just drug you silly.
Yeah, yeah, they are, and they won't stop drugging you because you're a subscriber for life and you're just a money maker. And yeah,
Yep. They'll change the med. They'll go from one to another to another to another. Just an endless series of
That's right.
changes.
That's right.
With you not getting any better.
It's a perpetual machine of. It's a perpetual nightmare of. It's evil. Wow. Wow, that you really had me locked in with that story of the voice and the crackling and it's. Did you
Totally
have
true.
any other encounters like that? Experiences like that?
Oh, I would talk to them, through the patient, that we carry on conversations. They don't like that. They're told not to do that.
Yeah.
Um, every time one of those prisoners completely recovered,
Yeah.
and it wasn't, it wasn't fast. It was like every several months, maybe.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would get crushed into my bed at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm,
Something was pushing me down in the bed, and I'd wake up and I'd be crushed in
mm,
the bed. And it
mm.
happened every time one of the prisoners recovered. It was like
Wow.
something did not like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
scared me the first couple of
I'm,
times. It scared me half to death. And here I am, like, am I losing it again? It's like, am
yeah.
I losing my sanity? Because this
Yeah.
was all crazy stuff.
Yeah. This
It's
is
the
this.
same kind of stuff that schizophrenics, experience. So
Yeah.
I felt like I had one foot in each world,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's kind
sometimes,
of dangerous. It's
yeah,
scary.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't it, sometimes it got tricky with the prisoners, because there was one time I remember one of the prisoners that I was working with in one of these
Yeah.
groups. He came in and he said, "Hey, this guard disrespected me. The voices are telling me to stick a knife in his belly." You know,
Mm.
and I'm like, okay, if he did that and I hadn't turned him in and they found out that I knew about it, I'd be fired. You know.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
other hand, if
Yeah.
I did turn him in,
Didn't you?
not one
Yeah.
of those prisoners would ever talk to me
Ever
again.
talk to you again? You couldn't
That
help
that
anybody.
that'd be it. You know.
Yeah. So
So
how
I
do you
ended
handle
up
it?
calling him in every day,
Uh-huh.
for a long period of time until
Yeah.
I felt he was over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we
Yeah.
got some into the voices didn't like me. They didn't like
Yeah.
me at all.
I'm sure. And
You know.
the staff didn't like you either, the psychologists and psychiatrists,
Well, I
right?
think they were possessed also.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. It's we live in crazy times. It's I consider today a biblical time of evil, of
Yeah,
deception and lies and
yeah,
and warfare, spiritual
yeah.
warfare. We
But
are under attack.
we are, but things are coming to the surface like never before, so we can see it. Once we
Amen.
see
Thank
it,
God.
we can finally do something about it. But
Yeah,
as long as it's
once we can
buried,
call it out and define it, and
yeah,
people, we have conversations like this, and spread the word, and it's really beautiful that people are waking up to that we live much in. There's much more in this world than the physical existence that we see and touch.
yes. And schizophrenia is caused by a non-physical entity.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I have one question for you. Do you know about V2K, voice to God technology?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, where they direct radio frequencies into people's ears or whatever, and then like a radio voice, somebody on a mic or whatever, the voice is coming from their brain,
You
and
know,
that it's a human being using technology projecting voices into people's brains. Uh,
that's what worried me about putting out this list of patterns,
yeah,
because these are
yeah,
the real patterns that
yeah,
schizophrenics hear.
yeah,
If they get
yeah,
hold of that
yeah,
and they start broadcasting that,
yeah.
those patterns are exactly like
Yeah.
schizophrenics.
Well, it's a very distinct from classic schizophrenia, but these people who get hit with V2K are labeled with psychosis and schizophrenia, schizoaffective and stuff, and it's super tragic, and there's
I've never met one.
yeah,
I've never met one.
I was a recipient of it for I don't know how long. It was less than a year. Back in 1993, I was going to college in Boston at BU, and I was getting hit by those voices when I'd walk the streets of Boston going to class and stuff. It was pretty intense, but eventually I was able to tune it all out.
Hmm.
But I knew that it was I knew it wasn't traditional psychosis or anything. I didn't have any background. I was an engineering student back then. I didn't have any background in psychology or anything like that. It was the 90s. But I knew that this was very a human projection. It wasn't some like demonic projection or anything. It was a human projection coming in there. It was more like mocking me for my appearance and things like that. Or it was just and trying to like induce just paranoia and social anxiety in me. And
Yeah,
it
that's
was
the same thing the
really
voices
effective.
do.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's the
And
same thing the voices
but
do.
again, that the people using this technology are demonic. Just like the whatever is possessing people with true schizophrenia, it's
Yeah.
demons.
Yeah. Well,
And
if they can get you diagnosed, you're screwed.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And once you're diagnosed, and I started seeing a psychiatrist for the first time, and I was 19 years old in Boston. And I hesitantly told him about these voices that I was
Yep.
talking about, and then he went down the whole, you know, seeing if I had psychosis. I'm like, no, dude, I ain't crazy. I ain't crazy. And eventually it went away, but I was for 30 years I was treated for either major depressive disorder or bipolar depression, and all the medications had catastrophic side effect
Hmm.
consequences with me. And it's in my own healing journey, I found complete relief from all my mental illness from a single supplement that has anti-inflammatory qualities for the brain, neuroprotective, antioxidant qualities. That completely changed my life. It also treated my hypersomnia, my insomnia, obviously the depression and brain fog. It was just orthostatic intolerance when you stand up too quickly and get lightheaded. This one single supplement did what 100 pharmaceuticals over 30 years couldn't do. And
What was it?
it's called luteolin. It's a flavonoid that occurs in like peanut shells, celery, things like that. And the specific product I recommend is called Brain Gain by algonaut.com. I heard reference to it as a new treatment, emerging treatment for brain fog, severe brain fog, which I had had my entire life. And I went in very skeptically with it. At this point, I was still a firm believer in our medical model. And and I noticed after a few days of taking the supplement in pill form that my thinking started getting sharper. And then after 2, 3 weeks, I went from sleeping 14 to 18 hours a day to sleeping 7 to 8, and having ridiculous amounts more energy than I did before the supplement. It was just a complete godsend. And no neurologist, no psychiatrist, no sleep specialist, nobody could ever help me. And then it's this single supplement, and then it is based off of the I heard about it thanks to a MD PhD who's now in Cyprus in the Mediterranean, but he used to be on Tufts Medical, and I think he was too awake and too aware and wanting to cure disease rather than treat symptoms, and I believe he got outcasted from the major medical schools, and now does his research independently in the EU.
How do you spell
Um,
that? How do you spell that thing?
Luteolin, luteolin. It revolutionized my life, and it's put me on this healing journey, and it's all due to chronic inflammation in the brain due to parasitic infection that our medical establishment denies, our diagnostics deny. And so this is what's put me on my crusade to destroy basically medicine, because so I've linked parasitic infections to Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, restless leg syndrome, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis. The list goes on and on that are due to parasites. Our medical diagnostics deny. It's completely. It's amazing. It's incredible. And around the same time, the luteolin gave me incredible relief for my neurological issues. It didn't do anything for my gastrointestinal issues. And I was going to have a hiatal hernia surgery on Medicaid that the taxpayer was going to pay for, that the doctor said was necessary to deal with all my gastrointestinal issues. And 3 days on the ivermectin, the generic anti-parasitic drug, relieved all of my severe gastrointestinal issues, so the surgery was never necessary. So, and all of these
No, that's a
gastrointestinal issues are also due to parasites, and so most of the modern Western medical model is built on the base assumption that we've eliminated parasites of significance when we haven't. We've simply rebranded these conditions into autoimmune disorders and neurological disorders of idiopathic unknown origin. And so then you don't have to cure the parasitic cause of these conditions, so you just treat the symptoms forever. And again, it's diabolical.
Mhm.
It's completely diabolical.
Yep,
This
that's
is
them.
this is combined with the mental health grift that you're talking about, scam. We're talking a multi-trillion-dollar a year scam globally, annually.
Yeah.
These people are absolute psychopaths who are in charge of medicine, who make the shots, yeah,
You could
it's
just look
wild.
at their ads on TV. You
Yeah,
know, all
yeah,
the
yeah,
yeah, that's just ad after ad after ad, and
yeah,
you know, showing all these smiling people with the side
yeah,
effects. Oh, death and brain
yeah,
damage, and you know, all these
and
horrible
and
side effects. And
and
here's these people smiling and laughing, and you know,
yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah,
take this drug. You know, it's
yeah.
crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, and they do this for multiple reasons. They get it to us to normalize thinking that disease is normal. These chronic illnesses are normal when they didn't exist in the 50s. So this has all been manufactured, and then that healing comes from a pill, where it actually comes from diet and exercise and
The
spiritual
spirit.
practices,
Yeah.
and then they're the main advertisers for TV. So they get to control the narrative of TV of
Yep.
what's said
Yep.
and isn't.
Yep.
So they get no criticism. And then, of course, they're in and out with the CDC and the FDA and NIH and NIMH with the revolving door of these
Oh yeah. Yeah.
corporations.
They pay them
And so
off.
it's just a big circle jerk where these guys are just destroying us
Yeah.
for profit, denying the pathogenic cause or the spiritual cause
Yeah.
of these conditions.
Yeah, and then you got the chemtrails that they have
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
convinced that
Yeah.
these things are
Yeah.
vapor trails. But you
Yeah.
see that the sky goes from one
Yeah.
horizon to the other, and
Yeah.
these vapor trails expand,
Yeah.
and you can just see them fall out of the air. I mean,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
poisoning us. They're poisoning us,
They're
and
absolutely
all over the planet.
our food all over. It's a global thing, but the West
Yes,
is getting hit the hardest. North America, Europe, Oceania are getting hit the hardest. Yeah,
Mexico.
we have poisoned food, we have poisoned water, and we have our beer supplies poisoned. It's like they're this is warfare. They're
Yes.
coming at us.
Yeah.
The powers that be are coming at us. But the beautiful thing is that once we identify these problems and the cause and how they're doing it, we can solve these problems.
Well,
And
the first step is being aware of it,
exactly,
which is
and
what
that's
we did
why
today.
exactly. I'm just it's really great that we do have these type of podcasts and stuff where we can spread the word. And
Okay.
I it's unfortunately the algorithms suppress these types of messages. So anybody listening, I really encourage you to go ahead and share not just this interview, but other podcasts that also highlight that what's really going on.
Yeah,
We're
and
under attack.
send me a link when you get this up.
Absolutely, I will. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, I got to run along, but
Yeah,
been nice talking to you.
it's been great talking to you, Cherry. Thank you so much for coming on. It's really been a pleasure and an honor. So,
You're more than welcome.
all right, stay blessed.
All right, take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.